When I started writing music, I had no real system. There would be days that were filled with inspiration, and then other days that just kind of felt like dead end after dead end. And after a while, I kind of started to feel like maybe music wasn't for me. Fortunately, though, over time, I did find some practices that made a really big difference. So today I want to share with you 3 tips for writing music that I wish I knew sooner. These are things that help me get through those days where I'm feeling stuck and uninspired, and I hope they make a big difference for you. So let's dive in. Now, in my opinion, there are few practices more valuable than simply learning the songs that you love. This is going to help you learn chords and chord progressions. It'll teach you about song structure. Believe it or not, this can even help you develop your own sound over time. You can look up lessons on YouTube, find guitar and bass tabs, look up chord charts, use Chordify. There are so many great resources out there for learning your favorite songs. But to take this a step further, you can use elements of your favorite songs to inspire a new creation. You may have heard this called referencing. So referencing, or using reference tracks, can really be used to inspire any element of a new song. The vibe of the song structure, melody, production, even lyrical themes. Using a reference is not only helpful for inspiration, but it can also help you communicate your creative vision more clearly to a collaborator or a producer or a mix engineer. You get the idea. Now, for today's discussion, we're obviously going to focus in on how referencing can help you in your music writing. Hard Place by Her is a song that I really love. So I learned it on guitar, and the chords are pretty simple. And in my opinion, what makes that chord progression so interesting is the B minor. This song is in the key of E major. So the B minor is a non-diatonic or a borrowed chord. I learned this really simple chord progression, and all of a sudden, I'm thinking about swapping out a key's major chords for minor ones. One day, I was doing some writing, came up with this little piece, but you'll hear clearly inspired by Hard Place. When you're referencing, it's always a good idea to switch up things like key, tempo, add or change some chords, just to not completely rip off the original writer. So in that piece, I added some chords, I changed the rhythm up a bit, but you can still hear that Hard Place reference, which I think is cool. Now, what if you don't play an instrument, but you still want to write music? Maybe you're a singer or a rapper looking for ways to create music to write your songs to. Good news, there's a lot of great tools out there for you, and these tools will be really useful for instrumentalists too. So let's check out a few. Song starters. It is a term you'll hear used a lot in the sampling world. So if we go into a sample library using Lander samples here, and if we type song starters into our search bar, let's refine by genre. And now you have all of these different ideas that can help you start a new song. Now, even though these samples are royalty-free, you can use them without having to worry about any copyright issues. It is still always a good idea to make these sounds your own. So what I like to do when I find a song starter that I really like, let's take this one for example, we'll come into the sample pack. And in a lot of cases, the sample pack will include all of the individual stems for the song starter that you really like. So if we go to this one that I like, looks like it's called 1969. So we are just going to type that in our search bar. And just as I thought, here's our song starter. And here are all the individual stems. Here's our bass. There's the choir. So what we can do is we can take all of these individual stems, download them. Now I can bring all of these into my DAW. So now that I have all of these individual stems in my DAW, I can arrange them however I want, as opposed to being locked into that original song starter. So I can time stretch these. We will pitch shift them up a little bit. Let's take the choir out. Let's take the organ out. Let's bring these horns over here. Take our 3 acoustic guitars, bring those here, put the piano in. I actually like the choir. We'll double that. I've got this drum sample that I want to use. Drums over here. So just the quick little start of an arrangement, but let's take a listen. Beyond this, I would probably take these acoustic guitar parts and this bass part, get rid of them and play something that's a little more my own, but definitely inspired by those original samples, kind of using those samples as a reference and a starting point to come up with something new. I really like using song starters like this, probably even more than using like a popular song as a reference, because you're starting with something that's already royalty free. And again, I think finding those individual stems is really crucial because you can use those as kind of building blocks and put together your own unique arrangement. Another tool that I like to use that falls into the song starter category is a chord generator. Different from working with samples where you're kind of building on an already existing idea, a chord generator is going to help you create something from scratch, which I really like. Let's bring up Lander Composer, and a quick shout out to Lander for their support by being a channel sponsor. They help me bring these videos to all of you, so shout out to them for that. Now, if you come up here, you can pick a scale. We'll go E major. You can pick your length and your time signature. And if you come down here, you have all of these different chord progressions that you can choose from. You can filter by minor and major key. You have all of these different moods that you can browse through. When you click on a chord, you can quickly see over in this menu, you have all of these different options to choose from. You have this auto generate button at the top, so you can just let Lander Composer pick chords for you. We're in the key of E major, so all of our chords are outlined in blue, which is really convenient, but you also have the flexibility to use any chord and any voicing that you want. You're not locked into a specific key. So if we want to use the example from earlier, we'll go from E to B minor to A major 7, A major 7 to A minor. You can also change the number of notes in your chord. So if you want to simplify it a little bit, you can also adjust the chords with things like note spread and strum. So now that we have some chords, let's talk a little bit about arrangement. I know for me, sometimes I'll get like an 8 measure chord progression that I really like, and figuring out how to arrange that into like a full piece of music sometimes gets a little tricky, but there are some kind of quick and easy things that you can do that aren't too complicated, so let's check that out. One of the easiest things you could do is add some variation to your chord progression without even having to change the existing chords. So this second time through, when we come back to the E, we could change the inversion. Gonna change our octave here. So even though it's the same chords both times through, those simple inversion changes adds some color and some variation. The other thing I like to do when I'm working with a chord progression like this is on the second pass, I will change either the first or the last chord or maybe both. A simple change, especially with a root chord, is to just go over to the relative minor. So here we can go to C sharp minor. The other thing that helps with arrangement is adding in more parts. So what's cool is we can come down here in Lander Composer and it'll start generating some bass parts and melodies. We could also add some arpeggios. Once you've you've got all of your different parts the way that you want it, you can just export your MIDI by dragging and dropping onto your DAW. And now you can use these parts to start building your song. So I took some time, I mapped out a rough arrangement, and before we wrap the video up, I want to show you this arrangement to hopefully give you some ideas for your own music. Now, I intentionally didn't change anything that we created in Lander Composer. One, just because I wanted to keep it simple, and two, because I wanted to show how you can take the same chords and the same parts and arrange them in different ways to add some variety. So here and here are our main chords. And one of the first things I did was just create two different parts with different note lengths. So they're the same chords, they're being played at the exact same time, just one part has a shorter note length than the other. In addition to that, we have two different instruments playing each part. That is the first synth, that is the Polymax. And then instrument 2 is the Astra synth. Once I have two foundational parts like that I can kind of alternate between, for me, it feels a little bit easier to start mapping out an arrangement that doesn't feel too repetitive. I can kind of start getting a sense for different sections, and you can see that here. I've got a chorus, then a verse, then a pre-chorus, then we repeat the chorus and go to either a bridge or an outro. And when I'm putting together a rough arrangement like this, I kind of think of this as phase one. I'm trying to get a few different vibes, a few different sections that are, I guess, distinctly different enough that the song starts to take shape. Now with our bass parts, same thing. We're using the same notes that we generated in Composer, and I'm also using two different synths for my bass sounds. So we've got this BA1 bass sound. And then on the back half of the chorus, I'm just mixing in the second synth. It is a arpeggiated eighth note bass part. A common technique that you'll see used quite a bit, and I'm using it here in this arrangement, is the 8-bar technique. And shout out to Austin from Make Pop Music. He just made a great video on this concept. But essentially what you're trying to do is every 8 measures, sometimes even 4 measures, you are trying to add something in, take something away, and basically move the song along, shape the energy, add some dynamics. And you can do this with literally any element of your track, the drum production, instrumentation, sound effects, obviously vocal layers. Just taking a look at the drum production, you'll see that I have either a riser or a drum fill coming in every 8 measures or so. I'm also adding and taking things away constantly throughout the arrangement. And these are all things that are going to add variety and help move the music along. So let's listen to a few different sections. Second half, we're adding in that 8th note bass part. Kind of take everything out, and we slowly build back up. Now in this verse and pre-chorus, if we're just listening to essentially the same chords for 16 measures, it's gonna get kind of boring. So in addition to the drum production, we can add this melody part on top. Really makes it feel like two different sections. Now, the only parts that I added that didn't come from Lander Composer, besides the drums, obviously, this little melody part on the chorus. And I'm doubling that on the guitar. And then I took some inspiration from the arpeggio part that I got from Lander Composer and just played this on the Astrolab. If you're new to the channel, I'd love to have you back, so make sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed today's video. Visit the video description for some more info on Lander Studio. They got a ton of great plugins, a huge sample library, mastering, distribution. So be sure to visit that link in the video description for a discount on Lander Studio. Thank you so much for hanging today, my friends. My name is Patrick. I will see you in the next video. Peace.